Greetings. This is the CoLab's monthly skills training, and this month our Racial Justice Hub is going to present what they created, an implicit bias training made by teens for teens. And we're super excited that Alan and Marion are going to present today. So I am going to share my screen and you all tell me, and I won't be able to see, but I want to ask, can everybody see this?
Yes.
Yep, I can see.
Yes, and then a caution, Cole, there's like your hands are raised on the screen. I think that might be an accident. Okay, there we go.
Okay, so why don't you guys start and just say next when you want me to push the.
Okay. Hello and welcome to our Implicit Bias Workshop. As you guys know, we're teens from the Racial Justice Hub of the Global CoLab. And the CoLab is a nonprofit organization of teens all over the world trying to make a change. And my name is Marion Beasley, and I'm from Arlington, Virginia. Implicit bias is the root challenge in addressing racial justice issues all across the world, and not only racial justice issues, but like gender issues and like just issues that issues that fall under that category. And we're using teens as our audience because we believe that targeting like teens at like during their developmental age, or like people that we believe teens have enough, they know what's going on, and we're teens ourselves, and we think that we can send the biggest impact in other teens. Next. Like I said, I'm Marion Beasley, and I know Alan is with me today, also presenting. Next. So this is just kind of a quick little overview of our workshop. First, we're going to kind of talk about like what exactly is implicit bias. And then we're going to move into like what is the actual science behind implicit bias and how it like kind of is like a part of your, like it's like everyone has it and it's like kind of like built into you. And then we're going to talk about like the impact of implicit bias and how it relates to like the UN and like sustainability goals and SDG. And at the end, we're going to talk a little bit about like how to address your biases. Next.
So starting off, what is implicit bias and a hypothetical scenario? So consider this scenario. A father and his son are in a car accident. The father is killed and the son is seriously injured. The son is taken to the hospital, where the surgeon says, "I cannot operate because this boy is my son." How is this possible? So you guys can write your answer into the chat. I want to see what you think. And I'll give you like 20 seconds or something. Okay, so here's another father. That's the mom, stepdad, two dads. So yeah. So even though this is a relatively well-known example now, almost 85% of people were thrown off by this riddle in an experiment performed as recently as 2014. The Boston psychology students and 103 children ages 7 to 17. So many who did not find this confusing admitted that their first instinct was to consider this to be a homosexual couple, which was also implied by the fact that they considered the surgeon to be a man. The answer was that the surgeon was his mom. Next. So what exactly is implicit bias? So implicit bias is just an unconscious choosing to believe in certain generalizations. It's not really something you can control, it's just something ingrained into everybody. So explicit bias is consciously choosing to maintain your biases. And then we have some examples: equality, equity, and liberation. Next. I can't hear.
Oh, you can't hear
Sure.
it?
Yeah.
Oh,
But well, so this is just so here he's wanted to include just something. Oh, okay, there we go.
can you hear it now?
Yes.
Like come from a far place where the caravan camels go, where they cut off your ear if they don't like your face. It's barbaric, but they told. When the winds from the east and the suns from the west and the sand in the grass is bright, armor dies upon my a can't fly to another Arabian land.
No, what happened?
That's good. The point kind of this little clip is to show you how implicit bias is kind of been rooted in our everyday culture, and it's something that like you witness, you kind of experience when you're a little kid, and how it becomes like more ingrained within your like mind as you're growing up. And the big thing with implicit bias is it's really unconscious. Like you don't really know it's there, and it's the circumstances, like the movies that you watch, the songs that you listen to when you grow up, and just like the environment that you're in as a little kid that helps basically develop these biases. And everyone has them, and it's just really learning and trying to understand like what they are and how to stop them from getting involved in like major decisions. So next, really quickly, we have our reflection questions. And after learning about like what exactly implicit bias is, think about these questions and try to answer them on your own. And if you want, you can pick one of the questions to answer in the chat. How are implicit biases a problem? What do I know about implicit bias? Well, how do implicit bias affect me and others in my community? Yeah, that's a really good point. Like the big like focus with implicit bias is that it really does stop you from seeing exactly like the whole picture and really understand what's actually going on. Yeah. And then yeah, exactly. They can keep promoting like harmful stereotypes and can really hurt like minority groups and like all over the world. Next.
Uh-oh, I'm stuck. There we go. Is that the next
Okay.
one?
Yeah. So the science behind implicit bias. So what do professionals believe, and how can it be countered? So now that we've discussed the basics of unconscious bias, let's look at the psychology behind it. Studies show that our mind processes about 11 million bits of information every second, but our conscious mind can only handle 40 to 50 bits of information. This means that most of our processing of information happens in our subconscious mind. Our experiences and exposures to people, ideas, topics, and topics directly affect the unconscious thoughts that we have during every second of every day. So here we have in groups versus out groups. So an in group is a group that we psychologically and socially identify with. An out group is a group that we do not psychologically identify with. So easier to feel hatred or mistrust towards an out group member. So more on understanding unconscious bias. To understand it, you have to understand the concepts of an in-group and an out-group, which is part of the social identity theory. This theory explains a normal cognitive process in which people have a tendency to group things together, often exaggerating the similarities of things in the same group and the differences between groups. We favor those that we see in the same group category. This is a group that we psychologically, socially identify with and vice versa for outgroups. It's far easier to feel hatred or mistrust towards an outgroup member than a member of your own group. Directly related to this is a bias called familiarity bias that states that the more exposure we have to someone or something, the more likable it is. So for example, if someone surrounds themselves or has been surrounded primarily by white people in friend groups, sports teams, in classrooms, they're going to unconsciously favor them over other races and ethnicities. We are more likely to help an in-group member if they're in pain than an out-group member because our empathetic response kicks in more easily to someone we can identify with. More on this, faces play a large role in determining trustworthiness. We can make judgments on the trustworthiness of a person based on their face in just milliseconds after meeting them, even when they aren't doing anything related to trust. So naturally, our familiarity bias kicks in and we trust them less if they look different than who we're usually exposed to. So, by human instinct, the people who are surrounded by only white people would feel less trust for a non-white person than the people of this, and at this point of this, it isn't to tell all of you to go find someone of a different race, ethnicity, or other group right now and become their friend. That's not really realistic or genuine. What I'm asking you to do is to put yourself in some of those settings, even if they're uncomfortable, when you will be surrounded by people or a person that isn't someone you usually cross paths with. Try to address your biases because this can help you counteract your implicit biases and give you stronger unconscious understanding of others. In addition to this, social media doesn't make attacking our biases any easier. When we are on social media or when we read the news, our brain filters everything we see based on our unconscious bias. This affects what we find relevant and irrelevant. People believe what they want to believe, and it's far easier to accept something that aligns with our views than what does not. What we don't often realize is that the effect that this has on others in other people being stereotyped is far greater than it may seem. The threat of being stereotyped gives the subject a sense of threat to self-identity that elicits responses like stress and anxiety. This is especially prevalent when this person is a token representative of their group, as they would feel more pressure to either align with the conventional image that is being expected of them, or the alternative is to be true to their own identity and risk the judgment of others for challenging the norm. Either way, if a harmful stereotype is placed on somebody, their psyche is harmed, which leads to the self-consciousness feeling of inadequacy. And as I said before, higher levels of stress and anxiety. Next.
I'm gonna keep going.
Next, yeah, next.
Okay, so now that we have like an even deeper understanding of what implicit bias is and kind of more like the science behind it, we have more reflection questions. And again, if you want to answer one in the chat, that would be super fun. First one is, what walls do I create within and around me that hinder me from embracing others? 2, who do I tend to exclude at my table and what can I do to include them? And 3, how can I target my own implicit bias?
Great questions. You've got about 9 minutes.
Okay, since we only have 9 minutes, we still kind of have a small little chunk to get through. So can we go to the next? So obviously, being a organization that works a lot through the UN goals, we all are kind of like aware with what the sustainable development goals are, and what they do, and obviously like the racial justice hub, we work a lot with the sustainable goal number 10, reduce inequalities, and that's where like a lot of there is like a lot of implicit bias research done by like the UN through like sustainable development goal number 10. Next. And there's also a large chunk of it in SDG 16 that has a lot to do with like peace, justice, and strong institutions, which definitely does work hand in hand with reduced inequalities. Sustainable Development Goal 16 advocates the need for peace, justice, and strong institutions. This is especially important when tackling systematic injustices, since the problem is often rooted in an aspect of the governmental institutions. This goal is hindered by populism and institutionalized racism. Populism or populist leadership easily leads to the creation of a scapegoat figure seeping into racism or the societal structure. The public seeks comfort in times of anxiety or common fear, and populist policies essentially provide a breeding ground for racism. So implicit bias and racism is definitely rooted sometimes in like government or like leadership, especially. Racism is like more specifically defined as prejudice or discrimination against a particular race or ethnic group, while individual racism is when a group of individuals is targeted because of their race or ethnicity. Institutionalized racism, where a lot of like implicit bias and the continuation of implicit bias kind of comes from, is the ideas of like white superiority that pervade thinking and actions of the society as a whole, from judicial systems to healthcare and even education. This prejudice has led to many injustices that we've like especially like all seen, such as like police brutality against non-white citizens and inequities in like many other aspects of life. Next. 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 So obviously for here, this is just some more like concrete data on implicit bias, especially in the United States, and how it affects things as common as like police stops and prison population. And through like looking at prison population rates or police stops rate, we can really see implicit bias and its effects, especially in our like day-to-day culture, and how it can affect it can really affect, and it can have really lasting and really negative impacts on people. Like obviously, yeah, okay. Obviously, from the graph on the right, the white population in America is 66.2%, and as looking through the other graphs, you can definitely see that the rates are very disproportionate when including like other races and looking at the like overall population of the US and then looking at like police stop populations and prison populations. Next. And finally, addressing your biases. Everyone has unconscious bias. It's not something that you can really control, like everyone has it. But the big thing is learning how to live with it and how to kind of keep ourselves like aware and understanding. And there is this really common or like kind of popular test. I think it was like created by it was created by Harvard students. And here I can put the link to it in the chat. And taking that test, I took it and I really was interested and I really liked my results. It basically goes through and kind of tells you, it asks you a bunch of questions and it kind of tells you like your biases, but other ways to like understand yourself and your implicit biases are like look for evidence against stereotypes in your like everyday environment and actively place yourself in situations where you can challenge your bias and like really continue to educate yourself about implicit bias and the negative and its negative effects as long as like the negative effects of stereotypes. Next. And join us at the Racial Justice Hub. I know like as like a whole, the Global Cal Lab is trying to recruit more teens, but we are too, like as like specifically also. So yeah, next.
Fantastic.
That was amazing. Great
Wow.
job.
That was fantastic. Okay. I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you so much.